Why was the youngest person in the aircraft the calmest one there? The CH-47 dropped into the frozen valley like it had lost faith in gravity. Metal screamed, harnesses swayed. The red light painted everyone the same color, blood before it happened. Riley Ward sat along the bench with her knees braced, shoulders squared, fingers moving through her medical kit with ritual precision. Gauze, seals, needles, everything in its place. Everything checked twice. Not because she was nervous, because order was how she kept the world from splintering. Someone leaned close, voice raised over the engines. "Just the nurse tonight," a smirk, a few easy laughs. It wasn't cruelty, it was habit. Riley didn't look at him, she didn't stiffen, she didn't shrink. Her eyes stayed on the open ramp, judging wind and angle like the darkness was a math problem waiting to be solved. 17 years old. That was the part no one could reconcile. Too young to belong in a place like this, too quiet to demand space. Her presence felt temporary to them, support, not spine. The medic patch did that. It simplified people's thinking. She let it. The green light snapped on. The valley opened beneath them, black and breathing, and Riley counted not seconds but patterns. When the first man surged forward, she moved with him. Not after, not before, exactly on time. Frozen ground hit hard. Rotor wash vanished. Cold punched into lungs. The team flowed outward, confident and sharp, a machine that had done this too many times to romanticize it. Riley dropped prone without being told, rifle angled, breath steady. No hesitation, no wasted motion. They moved into the valley funnel, walls rising, terrain narrowing. Low risk, they'd been told, quick in, quick out. Riley felt the wrongness settle early like pressure behind the eyes. Snow disturbed where it shouldn't be. Lines too clean, rooftops that felt watched. She held it in. The picture wasn't finished yet. The compound appeared like a secret that wanted to be found. Too open, too quiet. The breach was clean, then the night shattered. Gunfire from above, from behind, from angles that didn't make sense. One step and a man folded, blood dark on pale dirt. Riley was already moving, hands working before fear could ask permission. Tourniquet high, tight, controlled. Another blast tore the wall apart. Radios died. The valley woke up angry. This wasn't contact. This was intention. Rounds chewed masonry. Someone screamed. Someone cursed. Riley stayed low, voice calm as she dragged the wounded into the shallow mercy of cover. She didn't flinch when a round snapped past her head. She didn't look for permission. She stabilized, sealed, shifted bodies inches at a time, small movements that meant survival. Fire pressed harder. The exit vanished. The compound turned from shelter to trap. Riley listened between shots, not for noise, for rhythm. "They're feeding fire from the north roof," she said quietly. "When it pauses, they'll reposition." The pause came exactly when she said it would. And for the first time, someone really looked at her. What kind of medic predicted enemy movement like weather? The building groaned as pressure mounted. Dust choked the air. Injuries stacked. Ammo dropped. Riley flowed between rolls without ceremony, hands deep in blood one moment, rifle steady the next, firing only when the math demanded it. Nothing wasted. No panic. Outside, the enemy shifted tactics, probing shots, waiting, learning. "They're watching the breach, not the rear wall," she said. Truss began to move without being named. Men repositioned where she indicated. Fire missed where it should have landed. Breathing slowed when she spoke. Chaos tightened into structure. No one asked who she was yet. The fight didn't allow curiosity. The next blast came from inside. The wall collapsed in a roar. Fighters poured through, close, fast, committed. Someone went down hard. A rifle skidded across the floor and stopped near Riley's knee. She saw everything at once. Wounded stacked, exit gone, momentum collapsing, and the line she'd never crossed, medical only, stamped and signed after a mission where she'd acted without permission and saved lives anyway. She hesitated for exactly one heartbeat. Then she picked up the rifle. One shot, clean, final. The room felt it not because she fired but because of how. Her stance wasn't a medic's. Her rhythm wasn't fear. Reload without looking. Eyes locked. Commands low and precise. "Stay still," she told the wounded man as she tightened a tourniquet. "Breathe." Then she was up again, calling angles, predicting hesitation, building traps in seconds. The enemy surged and broke against it. Confidence drained. Bodies fell. She didn't chase, she read. "They won't push like that again," she said. "Smoke in 2 minutes." When the smoke came, she fired on motion, not shape. When the noise finally collapsed into fragile quiet, she lowered the rifle and went back to her knees, hands gentle again, checking pulse, adjusting lines like she'd never left her first role. Only then did the question land. "Who are you?" the team leader asked. She finished her work before answering. "Staff Sergeant Riley Ward, formerly Assault Element." She told them about the hostages, the order she violated, the reassignment that followed, no defense, no regret. "I won't pretend I'm sorry," she said, and no one asked her to. Dawn crept in gray and dishonest. The enemy relaxed exactly when she said they would. She sketched the breakout in dust, led the movement herself, silent, controlled. The helicopter arrived like thunder that meant mercy. As they lifted away, no one spoke. Respect didn't need sound. Later, under fluorescent light, Riley stood and reported herself. Clear, complete, ready to accept whatever came. Instead, a folder slid across the table. A second chance written carefully. Conditions, accountability, trust finally matched to capability. She accepted without relief. That night alone, she cleaned her rifle beside her medical kit. 2 tools, 1 purpose. Courage, she knew, wasn't about breaking rules to feel powerful. It was about carrying responsibility when obedience would cost lives. Some strength announces itself. Other strength waits quietly until the moment arrives, and action becomes the only honest voice. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. Why did the silence after the first shots feel heavier than the gunfire itself? For a few seconds, no one moved, not because they were frozen, but because everyone was listening. The kind of listening that isn't done with ears alone. The valley had gone quiet in a way that felt deliberate, like a held breath. Riley Ward felt it settle against her ribs, slow and cold. Silence like this never meant safety. It meant intention. She stayed kneeling beside Needle, one gloved hand pressed firm against the seal she'd just placed, the other bracing his shoulder to keep him still. His breathing was shallow, uneven, shock trying to pull him somewhere dark. She leaned in close enough for him to hear her through the ringing in his ears. "Stay here," she said softly, "just stay." He nodded once, eyes glassy but locked on her face like it was the only fixed thing left in the world. Around them, the team shifted into tighter cover. Boots scraped against concrete. A magazine clicked into place. Someone exhaled too loudly and stopped halfway through, like they were afraid even breath might give them away. Riley cataloged it all without looking up. The sounds told her where everyone was. The gaps told her where no one wanted to be. This was the moment when fear usually arrived. Not the loud kind, the quiet one, the kind that whispers calculations you don't want to make yet. Ammo was lower than anyone liked to admit. 2 men were already compromised. The exit they'd planned for was now a shooting gallery, and whoever waited outside knew it. Riley felt the old pressure build behind her eyes, the familiar pull between what she was ordered to do and what the situation demanded. She pushed it down. Not yet. The picture still wasn't complete. A single shot cracked from somewhere high and left, deliberately spaced. Not an attempt to hit, a test. "They're probing," she said without lifting her head. No one answered, but someone shifted position anyway. That was new. She finished securing Needle, then slid backward into a crouch, rifle coming up as naturally as her medical kit had minutes earlier. She didn't announce it, didn't ask. The weapon was already there, slung and ready, because survival didn't care about labels. Another shot, then two closer together. The rhythm mattered more than the sound. "They're watching reloads," she said, "trying to time us." A pause followed, short, evaluative. Then fire snapped in exactly the place she'd expected it not to be. Vance glanced her way this time, just a flicker, but it held something new, attention sharpened by necessity. The enemy adjusted again, tightening angles, stitching rounds along the edge of cover where fear liked to make people flinch. Riley didn't flinch. She slid 6 inches to her left, just enough to break the line they were testing, and fired once. The muzzle flash was brief. The effect was immediate. A shadow vanished from the rooftop. No celebration followed, no comment. The valley absorbed it and moved on. Riley's chest felt tight now, not with panic but with recognition. Whoever was out there wasn't reckless. They were patient, disciplined. This wasn't a mob reacting to noise. This was someone building a box and waiting for the lid to close. She hated boxes. Another man went down with a sharp grunt, shrapnel tearing through his leg when a round punched through a weakened wall. Riley was on him in seconds, fingers already slick, mind already 10 steps ahead. Pressure, wrap, immobilize. She worked fast but not rushed. Rushing wasted energy. Precision saved lives. "You're good," she told him, and meant you're alive, not you're fine. The gunfire ebbed again, longer this time, too long. Riley straightened slightly, eyes scanning the broken roofline, the jagged breach, the shadows beyond. Her breathing slowed deliberately, pulling her heart rate down with it. This was where people made mistakes, when quiet tricked them into hope. "They're moving," she said. "Pairs, one fires, one shifts." Calder shook his head once, sharp and disbelieving. "How do you?" The shot came exactly as she'd predicted, a decoy burst followed by movement on the opposite side. Vance swore under his breath and adjusted. This time, he didn't look surprised, just focused. Riley felt something shift inside her, not satisfaction, not pride, just the weight of inevitability. The more she spoke, the harder it would be to go back to being invisible. Another pause, then footsteps, close, too close. She raised her hand, palm down, a silent command. Fire held. The enemy rushed, confident they'd caught them mid-reload. They ran straight into prepared angles and controlled bursts that cut momentum out from under them like a rug pulled cleanly away. Bodies fell. The rush collapsed into chaos. Riley exhaled slowly through her nose. "They won't do that again." "Why?" Hale asked, his voice steady but edged now, curiosity cutting through command. "Because it cost them," she said simply, "and they're not careless." The building shook as a round impacted nearby, concrete dust raining down like gray snow. Riley wiped grit from her cheek with the back of her glove and moved again, checking on the wounded, adjusting placements by inches. She shifted Rook just enough to clear his line of sight despite the way he swayed with every movement. She repositioned Calder so his aggression had a direction instead of a leak. He watched her now, really watched her, and the jokes he'd made earlier had nowhere to hide. Minutes stretched. The enemy changed tactics again, spacing shots wider, dragging time out, letting blood loss and fatigue do their work. Riley felt the slow grind settle in her bones. This was siege thinking. Wait them out. Let desperation make the mistake. She leaned back against the wall, eyes half-lidded, listening, counting. The valley had a cadence now. She could feel it the way some people felt whether coming in their knees. "They're buying time," she said, "setting conditions for something heavier." "How much?" Hale asked. She tilted her head, listening past the echoes, past the men breathing around her. "Not long. They don't want us reorganizing." As if on cue, the explosion came, not at the breach but beside it. The wall buckled, then gave way, collapsing inward in a roar that knocked everyone to the floor. Dust and debris filled the air, choking and blinding. This was the commitment. Figures poured through the opening, fast and violent, silhouettes already firing. Riley rolled to one knee, rifle up, heart rate spiking but controlled. She fired once, twice. Each shot measured. Each one ended a threat instead of announcing panic. Calder went down hard, a round tearing through his thigh. He shouted, anger raw and unfiltered, trying to drag himself back with a leg that no longer listened. His rifle skidded away, stopping near Riley's foot. She saw the order in her mind. The one she'd signed, the one that said medical only, no combat engagement beyond immediate defense. She saw the boardroom, the clean uniforms, the words unacceptable risk. Then she saw Calder bleeding out. Riley reached for the rifle. Not dramatically, not defiantly, like it had always been hers. She brought it up, settled into position, and fired. The room changed instantly, not louder, not quieter, but sharper. Her movements didn't match panic. They matched training that had never really left her. Stay still, she told Calder as she cinched the tourniquet tighter. You fight it, you bleed faster. He stared at her, pain wide in his eyes, something else breaking through it. Recognition, maybe, or regret. She was back on her feet before he could speak. Atlas, hold that corner. Rook 2 feet right, watch the roof. They moved without hesitation. Riley felt the responsibility lock into place then, heavy, absolute. There was no pretending now, no stepping back once the noise stopped. She accepted it without ceremony. The enemy surged again, desperate this time. Riley raised her hand. Wait. The team froze on instinct. The rush came. She dropped her hand. The trap snapped shut. Fire erupted, controlled and lethal. Confidence outside shattered into confusion. They're done pushing like that, she said, scanning through the smoke. Smoke next, roof line. When it came, she fired on motion, not shape, guiding others through it with quiet calls. When the gunfire finally thinned into something distant and unsure, Riley lowered the rifle and knelt again beside Needle, hands gentle, voice steady. Stay with me, she murmured. Around her, the team watched in silence, not with awe, but with something deeper, the kind of respect that forms when survival rewrites hierarchy. No one asked her who she was yet, but everyone knew she wasn't just the nurse anymore. Why did the quiet after the smoke feel more dangerous than the fighting itself? The haze thinned slowly, reluctantly, as if the room didn't want to let go of what had just happened. Riley Ward stayed crouched near the collapsed wall, rifle angled down but ready, eyes tracking the empty spaces where movement should have been. The absence of sound pressed in on her ears until she could hear her own pulse again. That was never a good sign. Silence meant the enemy was thinking. Behind her, someone coughed hard and tried to smother it. Another man shifted, boots scraping just enough to make Riley glance back. Injuries changed the way people held themselves. She saw it instantly, the stiffness, the subtle favoring of one side, the way pain altered posture. She moved without asking, pressing a hand to a shoulder, adjusting a wrap, checking color and warmth with practiced efficiency. Easy, she whispered, don't fight it. She felt it then, that faint fracture inside her, the place where control met consequence. She had crossed the line now. There would be no rewriting that moment. The rifle resting against the wall wasn't temporary anymore. It was a decision, and decisions had weight. Hale stepped closer, careful not to crowd her. His voice stayed low. What do you see? Riley didn't answer immediately. She tilted her head, listening beyond the room, past the ringing and dust and blood. She counted seconds between distant noises. She felt the air change. They're pulling back, she said finally. Not leaving, repositioning. For what? She met his eyes for the first time since lifting the rifle. Containment. They think time on their side. Hale nodded once. No argument, no challenge. The question of authority had shifted without anyone nomming it. Minutes stretched. The team settled into a tense stillness, weapons trained, breathing controlled. Riley moved between them like a quiet current, adjusting placements by inches, shifting lines of fire so no one angle grew predictable. She felt the exhaustion creeping in now, not the physical kind, but the mental drag of holding too much responsibility for too long. Outside, the enemy tested again. One shot, then nothing. Another shot deliberately wide. Riley watched the dust jump from the wall and shook her head slightly. "They want us twitchy," she said. "They want us burning ammo." Calder swallowed hard, sweat slick on his face despite the cold. "So what do? We don't give it to them." Another long pause followed. Riley felt every second like a stone added to her chest. Needles stirred weakly, a soft sound that made her kneel beside him again, checking his pulse, adjusting his line. His fingers twitched around hers, reflexive, human. She squeezed back once. "You're still here," she said. "Stay that way." The next sound wasn't gunfire. It was movement, subtle, multiple points. The scrape of boots against rubble, careful and deliberate. "They're setting outer positions," Riley said quietly, "locking us in." Vance glanced at her. "How long?" She closed her eyes for half a second, running the math she didn't want to run. "Until dawn, if they can. They'll let blood loss and cold do the work." That landed hard. No one spoke. Riley straightened, feeling the weight of their attention now. She hadn't asked for it, but it was there, pressing against her shoulders like another pack. She thought of the review board. The word aggressive written clean and cold in a report. Too willing to act, too quick to decide. What they'd never written was why. Another shot cracked, closer this time. Then another, probing a different angle. Riley shifted rook again, compensating for the way his vision lagged. She adjusted Calder's position so incoming fire traced past him instead of toward him. Every move small, every move deliberate. "They're learning," Hale said. "So are we," Riley replied. The valley changed again as the light shifted, not brighter but thinner. That pre-dawn gray that made distance lie. Riley noticed it immediately. Her chest tightened, not with fear but with opportunity. "They'll relax when the light changes," she said. "They always do." Hale studied her face. "You sure?" "As sure as I was about the breach." He nodded slowly. "Then we plan." Riley knelt and drew lines in the dust with her finger, angles, movement, timing. A breakout, not a stand. Deception first. Noise where they weren't. Speed where they were weakest. "I'll lead the movement," she said. Hale opened his mouth, then closed it. Vance met his eyes and gave the slightest nod. Logic settled the argument before pride could start it. They waited. The waiting was the hardest part. Muscles cramping, blood drying sticky on gloves, the mind circling worst-case scenarios like vultures. Riley stayed still, breathing slow, keeping everyone else anchored by the steadiness of her presence. Then it happened, the subtle easing of pressure outside, voices drifting, a lull that felt careless. "Now," Riley whispered. She moved first, low and controlled, guiding them through the collapsed sector she'd been watching since the beginning. Rubble shifted under her boots, but she placed her weight carefully, distributing it the way she'd learned years ago in a different unit, under different expectations. A sentry appeared out of the gray, posture loose, attention forward instead of inward. Riley closed the distance without sound, blade flashing once, catching him before gravity could announce the fall. She eased the body down, heart hammering but hands steady. They flowed past her one by one, wounded supported, weapons angled outward. Behind them, on her signal, the rear element opened fire, dumping noise and fury into the empty building. The valley erupted. Enemy fire chased the sound, pouring into the wrong place. Riley broke into a run, guiding the team through trees and stone, breath burning now, pain flaring in her lungs. Rounds snapped through branches. Dirt kicked up at her heels. Then the sound changed. Deep, rolling, familiar. Rotors. Riley skidded to a stop for half a heartbeat, eyes lifting as a Blackhawk dropped into view, door guns already spitting fire. The radio crackled, a calm female voice cutting through everything. "Movement element, this is Guardian 2-1. We have you, move." Riley's throat tightened. She recognized the voice before the name came. "Anori," she breathed. The confirmation came back a second later, solid and real. Riley didn't smile. She didn't slow. She just drove them harder, counting heads, hands grabbing straps as they loaded fast. She climbed aboard last, scanning the tree line one final time. Then the aircraft lifted, banking hard as tracers stitched the air behind them. Inside, no one spoke. Blood, sweat, silence. Hale met her gaze across the cabin. No words, just understanding. They were alive. And everyone knew why. Why did the calm of the helicopter feel harder to survive than the valley they'd just escaped? The rotors drowned out everything else, but the silence inside Riley Ward's chest was louder than the gunfire had been. She sat against the bulkhead with her boots planted wide, rifle across her lap, medical kit braced against her thigh. Her hands had stopped shaking, but only because she was holding them still on purpose. Adrenaline was draining now, leaving weight behind. Heavy, unavoidable. Across from her, Calder stared at the floor of the aircraft, jaw clenched, face pale beneath streaks of dust and blood. He didn't look at her. Not yet. Vance leaned against the frame, eyes half-lidded, breathing measured. Hale stood near the open door, one hand gripping a strap, gaze fixed on the shrinking valley as if he expected it to reach up and grab them back. Riley closed her eyes for a moment, not in relief, in accounting. Every decision replayed itself behind her eyelids, every shot, every order she'd given without rank or permission. She felt the familiar tension tighten in her chest, the one she'd lived with since the reassignment, since the words unacceptable risk had followed her into every quiet moment. She had crossed the line again. This time, there were witnesses. The helicopter banked hard, the horizon tilting, and someone groaned as the movement tugged at their wounds. Riley was up instantly, moving between bodies, checking dressings, tightening straps, adjusting pressure. Her voice stayed low and even. "Easy, you're good, breathe with me." It grounded her. The work always did. Medicine was honest. It didn't care about politics or boards or reputation. It cared about what you did with your hands. When she finished, she returned to her seat and stared at the rifle resting across her legs. It looked ordinary now, not like the thing that had changed everything. Hale turned from the door and met her eyes. He didn't speak. Neither did she. Respect didn't need sound. The flight felt longer than it was. When they finally touched down, the world shifted abruptly. Concrete instead of rubble, white light instead of smoke, antiseptic replacing cordite. Medics rushed forward, voices overlapping, hands pulling at gear and stretchers. Riley moved with them, helping transfer the wounded, giving quick, precise updates without embellishment. Tourniquet at time mark, chest seal holding, fluids running. No one questioned her, no one interrupted. Only when the last stretcher disappeared down the corridor did the quiet return. Riley stood alone for a moment in the hangar, helmet still on, feeling suddenly younger than she had in years. 17. Too young, they'd thought. Too young to carry what she was carrying now. The debrief room was small and windowless. A table, a few chairs, nothing to soften the truth. Riley stood when she was called in, posture straight, hands relaxed at her sides. Hale sat at the head, Vance off to the side. Calder was already there, leg elevated, wrapped thick, face drawn tight. Riley didn't wait for permission. "I violated my reassignment orders," she said evenly. "I engaged in direct combat and assumed tactical control during the engagement." The words landed clean and final. No excuses, no qualifiers. Silence followed, the kind that made your ears ring. Hale spoke next. "Her actions saved my entire team." His voice was steady, unyielding. "Any report that omits that is incomplete." Vance nodded once. She assessed faster than anyone in the room. and she accepted the risk. Calder swallowed. He looked up at Riley finally, eyes raw. "She kept me alive," he said quietly. "No defensiveness, no jokes, just truth." The door opened and a colonel stepped in, uniform crisp, presence filling the room without effort. He listened as the report was finished, eyes never leaving Riley's face. When the room went quiet again, he spoke. "I was on the board that reassigned you," he said. "I disagreed with it then." Riley didn't react. "You were labeled aggressive," he continued, "too willing to act without permission." He paused. "What we missed was intent." He slid a folder across the table. Riley didn't reach for it immediately. "Naval Special Warfare has requested a dual-role authorization," he said. "Medic and assault qualified, defined command relationships, clear protocols, accountability written in ink." Riley opened the folder once, closed it. "I'll accept the conditions," she said. "No relief, no triumph, just responsibility." Later, alone in the barracks, she sat on her bunk and cleaned her rifle with the same care she gave her medical tools. Each motion deliberate, each piece returned to order. 2 instruments, 1 purpose. She thought of the valley, not with pride but with clarity. Courage had never been about breaking rules to feel powerful. It was about knowing them, respecting them, and still carrying the weight of a decision when obedience would cost lives. Riley laid the rifle beside her medical kit. She didn't look at either for a long time. Some heroes needed to be allowed to be seen. Others learned to wait quietly. Until the moment arrived, and action became the only honest answer. Why did the morning, after the mission, feel heavier than the night they almost died? Riley Ward woke before the lights came on. She always did after missions like that. Not from nightmares, those came later, but from a kind of alert stillness, like her body didn't trust the world enough to sleep deeply yet. The barracks were quiet, the air smelling faintly of disinfectant and old coffee. Somewhere down the hall someone coughed. A door closed softly. She sat up on the edge of the bunk and let her feet rest flat on the floor, grounding herself. Her hands were steady now. Too steady. That always came after. The calm that felt earned but fragile, like thin ice that could crack if she put too much weight on it. Across from her on the small metal table, her medical kit sat repacked and sealed. Beside it, the rifle lay broken down, cleaned, reassembled, checked twice. 2 rolls, 1 body. She stared at them both, not choosing, not rejecting either, just acknowledging what was true. Footsteps passed the doorway, then stopped. A knock followed, soft, controlled. "Come in," she said. Hale stepped inside, posture relaxed but deliberate, like he didn't want to bring rank into the room unless it was invited. He looked different out of gear, older, more human. He closed the door behind him without comment. "You sleep?" he asked. "A little." He nodded, accepting that for what it was. Debrief done, paperwork's moving. She waited, silence stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt earned. "You know," he said finally, "there's a difference between command and control. Most people confuse them." Riley didn't respond. She didn't need to. "You didn't take control because you wanted authority," he continued. "You took it because no one else was positioned to see what you saw." She felt something loosen in her chest at that. Not relief, recognition. "They'll ask you to explain yourself again," Hale said. "More boards, more rooms, same questions." "I know. They'll ask why you didn't wait." She met his eyes. "Because waiting would have killed you." Hale held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded once. "That's the right answer," he said, "even if they don't like it." After he left, Riley sat back down and let the quiet return. It pressed in gently this time, not like a threat. She closed her eyes and let memories surface. Not the firefight, not the shots, but the moments in between. Needle's fingers tightening around hers. Calder's breathing slowing when she spoke. The way the team had moved without question when her voice cut through the smoke. She hadn't felt powerful then. She felt necessary. Later that morning, she walked across the base toward the medical wing, boots crunching on gravel. The sun was up now, bright and unapologetic, making the world feel almost normal. Too normal. People passed her without staring, without saluting, without knowing what she carried quietly inside her. Inside the ward, the smell of antiseptic hit her like a familiar anchor. She checked charts, adjusted IVs, spoke softly to men who pretended not to be afraid. She didn't mention the valley. They didn't ask. Pain had a way of stripping conversation down to essentials. Calder was awake when she reached his bed. He looked smaller here, stripped of armor and bravado, leg elevated, face drawn. He watched her approach with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You didn't have to come," he said. She checked his vitals without looking at him. "Yes, I did." Silence stretched, then quieter. "I was wrong about you." She paused, fingers still on his wrist. "That wasn't the worst thing you did yesterday." He let out a breath that might have been a laugh if it didn't hurt too much. "I didn't see it," he admitted. "What you were carrying." "No one asked," she said, not unkindly. He nodded, eyes dropping. "Thank you for not letting me die." She met his gaze then. "Try not to waste it." When she left the ward, she felt something shift again. Not closure, but alignment. Pieces settling into place. The next meeting came faster than she expected. Another room, another table, different uniforms, same careful language. Riley stood when addressed, answered when asked. She didn't embellish, didn't soften the edges. "Do you regret picking up the rifle?" one man asked. She thought of the valley, of the silence before the rush, of the weight in her hands when she made the choice. "No," she said, "I regret that it was necessary." That answer landed harder than she intended. A few people shifted. Pens paused. Another voice, "Would you do it again?" Riley didn't hesitate, if the situation demanded it. No defiance, no pride, just fact. When it was over, she walked out into the sun again, feeling older than 17 and younger than she'd felt in years. The path forward wasn't clean. It never would be. Dual roles came with dual expectations. More scrutiny, less forgiveness. But also clarity. That evening, she stood alone on the edge of the training field, watching a group of new medics run drills under fading light. Their movements were sharp but tentative, confidence still forming. She recognized herself in them. The quiet ones especially. The ones who listened more than they spoke. She wondered which of them would one day be forced to choose between permission and necessity. Riley turned away before the thought could harden into bitterness. She wasn't angry anymore. Anger burned energy she needed elsewhere. What she felt instead was resolve, quiet, unglamorous, durable. That night, she wrote a single line in her notebook before turning off the light. Prepared is not the same as eager. She closed the book and lay back, listening to the bass settle around her. Tomorrow would bring more training, more expectations, more moments where silence would ask her who she really was. And when it did, she already knew the answer. Not a nurse, not a shooter, not a symbol, just someone willing to act. When waiting was the most dangerous choice of all. Why did the moment everyone praised her feel like the one she trusted the least? Riley Ward stood at the edge of the airfield as dusk settled in, the sky bruised purple and gold where the sun had burned itself out behind the hills. The day had been loud with congratulations she hadn't asked for and acknowledgments she hadn't needed. Quiet nods from people who had once looked past her. A hand on the shoulder that lingered a second longer than protocol required. Words like remarkable and exceptional floated around her like loose fabric, never quite touching skin. She let them pass. Praise had always made her uneasy. It asked her to become something fixed, something others could point to and simplify. And Riley had learned early that being simplified was dangerous. She watched a helicopter lift off at the far end of the field, rotors beating the air into submission. For a second, the sound took her back to the valley, cold biting her lungs, the the weight of the rifle settling into her shoulder, the moment where choice had narrowed into a single, unavoidable line. She breathed through it slowly, letting the memory pass without gripping it too tightly. Footsteps approached behind her. She didn't turn. "You don't come to these things," Vance said quietly. "I know. They notice." She shrugged slightly. "Let them." He stood beside her, gaze following hers toward the darkening sky. "You change the way some people think out there." "That wasn't the point." "No," he agreed, "but it happened anyway." Silence stretched, comfortable, honest. "You'll be watched now," he said, "more than before." "I already was." Vance glanced at her, a hint of something like pride softening his expression. Different kind of watching. After he left, Riley stayed where she was until the air cooled enough to raise goosebumps along her arms. She liked that sensation. It reminded her she was still in her body, still present, still accountable. That night she dreamed, not of gunfire or explosions, but of hallways, endless ones, doors lining the walls, some open, some closed. In the dream she walked them calmly, not rushing, not afraid. She didn't try to open every door, only the ones she was meant to. She woke before dawn, heart steady. Weeks passed, training resumed, paperwork turned into policy. Her new role took shape slowly, deliberately, like something being built to last rather than impress. Dual qualification, clear lines, defined authority, no room for ambiguity when lives hung in the balance. Some people tested her, not openly, subtle things, a delayed response, a question framed as a challenge. She met each one the same way, calm, precise, unreactive. Competence answered better than confrontation ever could. Others sought her out quietly. Younger medics. A pilot once, asking how she'd known the timing. A junior operator who didn't say much, just stood beside her on the range and watched how she breathed between shots. Riley didn't give speeches. She didn't tell stories about the valley unless asked directly. And even then, she spoke of it in fragments, not because she wanted to protect herself, but because she wanted to protect the truth from becoming myth. One afternoon, she found herself back in a briefing room, smaller than the one that had once dismissed her. A new team, fresh faces, the air buzzing with the nervous energy of people about to prove something. She took a seat near the end of the table, medical kit at her feet, rifle slung across her back. No one laughed this time. No one smirked. They didn't know her story in detail, but they'd heard enough. The briefing began. Objectives, risks, timelines. Riley listened, quiet as always, eyes tracking the map, noticing the places where confidence slid into assumption. When the leader finished, there was a pause. Riley spoke then, not loudly, not forcefully. "There's a blind spot on the eastern approach," she said. "It looks open, it's not." The leader nodded immediately, adjusted the plan. No one asked how she knew. They didn't need to. As they stood to move out, a young medic lingered near her, hands fidgeting with the straps of his kit. "Sergeant," he said, voice low, "can I ask you something?" She waited. "How do you know when to step forward?" he asked. "When it's not your place." Riley considered him for a moment. She saw herself there, quiet, observant, already carrying more than anyone realized. "You don't wait for permission to save lives," she said. "But you do wait until you're sure it's about them, and not about you." He nodded slowly, absorbing it. "And if it costs you?" "It usually does," she said gently. "That's how you know it matters." The mission that followed was smaller, cleaner, no valley, no siege, but there were moments, tight ones, where decisions mattered more than speed. Riley moved through them with the same measured calm, stepping forward when needed, stepping back when not. The team returned intact. No one made a big deal out of it. That was how she liked it. Months later, Riley found herself alone again, sitting on a low wall overlooking the training grounds at dusk. The bass hummed softly around her, life continuing. She thought about the girl she'd been when she'd first arrived, 17 underestimated carrying silence like armor. She hadn't lost that silence. She'd learned how to use it. She took out her notebook and flipped through pages filled with sparse entries, observations, reminders, truths earned the hard way. On the last empty page, she wrote slowly, carefully. Strength isn't loud. It doesn't demand space. It prepares. It waits. And when the moment arrives, it acts. She closed the book and let the sky darken completely. Riley Ward didn't become a legend. Legends required exaggeration, and she had no interest in being enlarged beyond the truth. What she became instead was something quieter and rarer. Reliable. When things went wrong, people looked for her, not because she demanded it, but because experience had taught them that calm often stood slightly apart, watching, ready. She never corrected anyone who called her a nurse, or a shooter, or a leader. Labels were conveniences. Reality was messier and far more human. On some nights when the bass settled and the world felt briefly still, Riley would think of the valley, not with fear or pride, but with acceptance. It was part of her now, woven into the way she moved through the world. Not a scar she hid, not a trophy she displayed. Just a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous thing isn't the enemy outside. It's the moment when no one thinks you matter, and you decide whether to believe them. Riley never did. She had learned something simple and unshakable. Dignity doesn't shout. It doesn't posture or ask to be seen. It shows up prepared. It carries responsibility without applause. And when silence breaks into chaos, it acts.